Welcome to the Enough to Keep Going network. This is episode 35. Uh, what's our new tagline? Grown-ups who game, the discussion show.
Yes.
We're off to a rollicking start. And because I just brought the agenda up and I forgot to type that in the agenda. So it threw me off for a second. It is Tuesday, March 6th, 2018. And so this is the discussion show, and we kind of dive into any topics of interest kind of about our favorite hobby. And tonight we're going to probably get into some chat about basically the gaming market as we perceive it today and some problems with it but I am Swiss Guard, and I am joined by two of my colleagues, Osiris Prime. How are you doing tonight?
I'm well, a little tired, but that's all right. Hopefully we'll get through this episode without too much problems.
His lower third there is hyperbole because he says he's only a little tired, but he claims super tired gamer with multiple exclamation points. Just in case you didn't believe him, he has to emphasize that. So
that's all right.
We also have with us basically the heart of the E2KG network. He's probably typing something in a Twitter or something right now, so I'm going to throw it to him. Agasicles, how are you doing?
All right. Hopefully everybody's doing okay.
We will survive, I think. All right. So so on the discussion show, we don't really get into what we've been playing very lately. But we do like to recap just so if people follow along at home, they can keep track. I know some of us here keep track in spreadsheets. I would question the motives of any of our listeners that would also mimic that habit. But Prime, let's start with you. You have been doing, it looks like your 3 standbys.
That's right. It's the norm for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, playing a little bit of PUBG on the Xbox One. I didn't get to play as much as I would have liked, but I did do a stream on Saturday, I believe it was. So through Mixer, so I got that up on my YouTube channel there, as you can see over here. And then also I was playing a lot of Rocket League and Minecraft, both on the Switch, Nintendo Switch. So didn't play with my son this week though, but just by myself.
And Agasicles was also on the Switch, but the game a little bit different than those.
So I had been playing a little bit of Doom on the Switch, doing some game captures and kind of updating how I was doing some things on the channel, on my YouTube channel. And I probably spent an equal amount of time doing some hardware initial impressions over on Rounding Off Infinity. So this week I did initial impressions of the Alla Excalibur SI-881 mechanical gamepad. So kind of like if you're familiar with like the Razer Orb Chroma or Tartarus Chroma, but these little kind of like half-width like keyboard controllers that are just the size of like one hand with a palm rest are some products I've been checking out, as well as as Lenovo's new Chromebook 500E, which I did a initial impressions video of last night. So a little bit of Doom, lots of hardware reviews.
Chromebook.
Yep.
I have not done much of anything because we've been having some work going on in our house. I managed to scratch in a little bit of time in Borderlands 2 one morning, but that's about it. So hoping to change that as we move into this week.
What did you play that on?
PC.
Oh, PC, okay.
So Agasicles, do you want to kind of introduce the topic since you were the one that originally pitched it, or?
No, man, you've got host. Go right ahead with it.
All right. So the earlier I threw out prompt for anyone to throw in a topic that they wanted to talk about and care about, and Agastocles, as he is wont to do, jumped right in, and he came up with this topic. He said the mid-'80s there was a glut of low quality games that basically kneecapped the industry. It drove it almost to extinction, and it was basically the games industry kind of fell into hibernation, as he called it, and the market was pretty much blown away until console generation 3, which would have been, the NES era, the original NES era. Things started to recover. And the question for tonight is, could the same thing happen today with basically the proliferation of decent quality but minimum free marketplaces and service platforms that are on the rise? So basically we have a lot of games and a lot of service platforms to throw those games out there, and is the market going to get so oversaturated that people kind of just find something else to do? So Agastocles, since you were the one that pitched it, I'd like to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to do a little more setting of the table stakes, just because some of this history is really curious, and I think it's really important. We talk a lot. I know I emphasize a lot that gamers really need to know their history, and they really need to know things about the industry to really fully grasp the various dynamics of the thing that they've made their hobby. And this isn't any rocket scientist. I'm grabbing this straight from Wikipedia. I lived through it, so it's a little closer to home as well. But the year was 1983, and in the video game market crash, as Swiss said, it was called Atari Shock in Japan. Just so everybody understands the magnitude, the industry was $3.2 billion in 1983. By 1984, by 1985, it had dropped to $100 million. I just want to say that one more time. $3.2 billion. Think of all the people that employed. It fell to 100 million by 1985. And as Swiss mentioned, so that was console generation 2, which was, it's hard for me to keep track because there were a lot of things going on. Console generation 3, which was the Nintendo Entertainment System as well as the Sega Master System, kind of firmly cements in my mind. From that point forward, I can much more easily. Yeah, keep track and understand like what consoles were in what generation. And that's to highlight the fact that there were several factors that contributed to this. There were tons of consoles at this time. So Atari had both the 2600 and the 5200 out at the same time. You had ColecoVision and you had the Magnavox Odyssey 2. To me, the really big problem, you also had Intellivision, the Intellivision that was out at this time. To me, the really big problem was that somehow, either via a lack of patents or through deliberately arranged licensing deals, there were tons of clones of the core systems. So you would walk into Sears and you would see all these different systems that could play Atari games that were not Atari consoles. Excuse me, same thing for the Intellivision. And people would buy these things and you would have different experiences on them. Home computers were starting to blow up at this time. We have the PC today. Inflation was kind of rabid. But a big thing was that there were also, the industry was a lot less mature, as I just mentioned, in terms of patents, licensing, copyright, publishing control, and how exactly that was supposed to work. So that's kind of a round picture of everything that was going on at the time. So I think Prime is trying to share out some Atari pictures for us and various consoles that were out. But yeah, so the question is, to amplify it or go back to it, is there's a little bit of the same kind of stuff going on today. You don't have a glut of consoles, but there's a ton of games, and there seems to be, in my opinion, one of the reasons we raise this is because there's an argument that can be made that there's been a loss of throttling, control, and curation of games. We have a ton of services propagating all over the place, everybody is trying to go after and become the next Steam. Steam has itself loosened control, and in my opinion, that platform has become entirely unusable in terms of discoverability and using it to it's like every retail store, right? I mean, we've all heard the cliches, and I'm sure some of us live by it. Of you kids sit in the car and be quiet. I'm going in, I'm getting my one thing, and I'm coming out, right? And that's kind of what you have to do with Steam now. But there's tons of places to buy games now. Like I said, Steam has loosened up its own control so that when you go in that thing, there's hundreds to thousands of games in your face, and it's almost impossible to tell which ones are worth your time. Xbox Live Arcade has lived through the same thing. What really kills me, and I'm sure this is gonna get Prime because I think he finds this funny, is I don't flipping understand what in the hell early access is, right? Why are we doing that? And why are we now doing it across every service, right? So now you can play games on console that are available but aren't ready. And I'm like, why are you bothering me? Just tell me when the thing is ready, right? So and on Steam, these early access games cost money. So my question is we have some weird, wonky economic forces at play. We have mass proliferation of games of incredibly varying quality going through the roof. You have one platform, the PC, that quite frankly, a lot of people are just plain out afraid to get into because of that assault of games and volume. And my question is as people continuously predict the impending doom of the console, this is the last PlayStation, this is the last Xbox. I'm starting to wonder if that could really happen, right? Is the fact that we have democratized getting your game into the market so much created the situation where we could just tank it by making the market essentially useless?
I don't see the danger as far as the games industry collapsing. I think if you want to argue that we could see some sort of, I don't know, collapse is a strong word, but breakdown in what games are developed and how they're developed. I could definitely see that happening, but I just feel like Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo are pretty entrenched as the big three players, and I don't see how there's a proliferation of like small independent games really affects them as far as the next Mario or the next Zelda or the next Halo or what have you. Those AAA titles will continue to be pumped out, I think. And as far as the death of the PC gaming industry, could that collapse? I mean, it did go through a time of some doldrums, I would say, fairly recently. But it's just for me, like I this discoverability and this marketability. You have companies with massive megaphones, and these companies can get their message out, and they can get people to discover their games and know their games are coming out and get excited about their games. That's what early access is all about. It's all about creating an emotional connection with the developers and the team, and they get a little cash up front for it. So, but these big studios can definitely do that and continue to do that. The question is, the small independent studios, is that going to continue, or is it going to continue to be what it effectively is now, which is scratching lottery tickets? There's Cliff Harris has been a kind of independent developer for probably since the late 90s, I think, and he does a lot of just kind of strategy PC games, and he does pretty well for himself, but he's not under any illusions that this is like some kind of a gold rush. So he was talking. I had a blog post that I read from him back in June of 2017, and it was basically, your indie game will flop and you will lose money. It was what he described it, and he said he found kind of the median top seller out of 348 pages of top seller selling indie games on Steam, and it was 3,500 sales, right? 3,500 owners. Top price has been $10, been out 9 months. He wrote, maximum conceivable income is $20,979 to the developer. In practice, as it's been on sale, let's multiply that by 50% and get about $10,000. Because this game isn't exactly World of Warcraft, but has a proper 3D graphics thing going on, positive reviews, and a decent capsule graphic. Let's depress ourselves with the numbers. Assume the developer is a single person with no other costs and keeps all the money, $10,000 a year, or roughly 1%. He had earlier estimated what people would be getting at PUBG. So it's not a viable thing. And he said, these figures are rough, but it is what it is. It's a winner takes all market. So he says you're either at the top 0.1% of indie developers or you're unemployed with an expensive hobby where you effectively make free games. So I think that there are two questions, whether this market can sustain indie developers, but I don't really see it affecting the big players that already exist. Prime, did you have any thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as far as the early access, I'm gonna kind of agree with you, Zeus. Not because I don't, not because I don't know what it is or what they're trying to do. I think I know what you're trying to do. They're trying, like Swiss said, they're trying to get the hype out there and get their game exposure. But I think in the long run, having it up front like that and out in the public, and obviously you're going to get negative and positive reactions from the gaming population, probably mostly negative, just because a lot of people see all those little problems that are popping up, and obviously I don't want to say they don't understand. I guess kind of in a way they don't understand that this is early access. This is not the full game, and maybe that's not getting out there as much as it should be. So they're playing this game and they say, "Oh, okay." Maybe they finally do figure it out. Okay, it's early access. So I'll just wait until it's fully out, and then by that time, that could be 6 months, maybe even a year later. I remember when I was playing Ark, when it first came out on Game Preview, which is early access for Xbox. I played it for I don't know, probably about 4 to 5 months straight. Just like that's pretty much all I was playing, kind of like I like to do, just steamroll a game. And I was playing it, and then they did updates, and obviously they warn you, sometimes stuff will disappear, some break stuff, and I had finally got like this big base set up and everything happened, and then they did an update and it like just totally wiped out everything, and I was like, you know what, I'm done with the game for now. I'm gonna wait until it releases, and then it was supposed to release like I think about maybe 6 to 9 months from that point where I had stopped, but it never did. It was like almost like a full year later, and by that time I was like, you know what, I'm kind of over it. I was like, I don't want to go back and start all over because it's kind of it's a multiplayer game, kind of MMO-ish kind of a game. So I was like, I don't want to start all over and do all this again and build up all this stuff. I even started it at one point, and I don't want to say the same thing happened. Just something happened where I didn't play for it for a little while, and then other tribes and stuff like wiped out my base. And I was like, you know what, I'm done with this game for now. I just can't do it anymore. So I think in the long run, it can kind of hurt them. In that respect, it's something it might be out there a little bit too long. So that's early access and game preview. And as far as like the indie stuff, I don't think it's so much that there might be so much so many games out there that it's gonna just kind of collapse everything. I think it's more that it's hard for these indie games to just get noticed. I mean, you can look on Steam, and you can look on Xbox and even Nintendo, and Nintendo a little bit less maybe because they don't have as many games, kind of sort of. They're starting to get up there too though themselves, and it's just kind of hard for those little guys to get noticed. And sometimes maybe like a website, IGN or GameStop or GameSpot will spotlight something if it happens to start shooting up the charts. But it's almost like a word of mouth thing, I guess. And I don't know. It's just I don't know if that's going to discourage people, from just saying, you know what, I can't even get discovered, so I'm just gonna, I'm not even gonna bother with this anymore. So they're just gonna quit. So I don't know. I just I don't think like overall I don't think it's gonna be a collapse. So that the games industry is just gonna either collapse or implode or whatever word you want to use there. But I think it's just more of discoverability for a lot of these games. And obviously, like Swiss said, I think that the AAA games they're always going to be there. I think like Ubisoft did, or Ubisoft, however you want to say it. They did a good thing with Assassin's Creed where they kind of they actually waited a couple of years or a year at least and before they came back. So they can try things like that and just other ways to try to get their games out there.
So let me ask you guys. So and I'm not trying to rally the troops around this concept that the whole games industry is going to implode, right? It's more a matter of questioning. That's the extreme case. A, could that happen, and if B, not, then what types of incremental things on that approach path potentially could. And those are some of the things I want to bring out now because, and I don't think you guys have, but I think a lot of gamers, if you pose this question to them, would kind of just poo-poo the whole concept, right? Would go, that's not going to happen. That's not even a reasonable question. But the things I would ask is, we have lost bits and pieces here and there. We've done an episode where we talked about genres that have disappeared, right? Some of those genres that were beloved to us. I will say, as a tech guy, I have endured, across 2 or 3 decades, instances where products I loved were driven to extinction because a vocal minority downplayed it. The media jumped on that bandwagon and downplayed it. Everybody has flipped out about the notion of iPads and flips out about now today the notion of digital ink. And as I recorded this thing about the Chromebook last night, I was like, I've been doing digital ink for 20 years. It has gotten me through 2 graduate degrees, right? And now all of a sudden a study comes out saying, hey, oh, by the way, when you write things down, it's probably likely that you retain it better than when you type it on a keyboard. And I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that 20 years ago, right? So, but because people rallied behind boo-hooing the tablet PC, it went away for years. And then when the iPad came back, all of a sudden digital inking became a good thing. So these things, in my mind, have happened in small, incremental, kind of micro economies, right? And specific to gaming, the things I want to throw out now are we endured years where there was no mid game, right? It was either AAA or indie, and there was if I talk about games that retail for $59.99, right? That whole notion of a $39.99 game or $49.99 game that went away for years, and that used to be a big part of the industry. Were these kind of economy titles that delivered a lot of thrill for a good chunk of savings that would attract gamers to checking them out. But that went away for a long time. We're starting to kind of get back to that. Indies for a time through various time points have come and gone and have left preeminence. I think, during the year of like Papers, Please and Don't Starve, there was a period of time where, from my perspective, indie games got very pretentious. And anybody kind of talked, they were kind of the hipster thing, where it was cool to like them because they weren't AAA, and then there was a time period where people got over that and indies weren't a big deal. But the other thing that's kind of going on today is, Valve, Microsoft, Sony, Ubisoft. We talk about how cool it is that Ubisoft does it. And I can't remember the name of the program, but where they kind of take indie games and give them kind of sort of almost AAA marketing, but they're still kind of an indie level game. But that's coming off on some people as that's now a corporate property, right? Ubisoft pushed that. I mean, I feel so bad for the No Man's Sky guys, right? Because that got beholden to kind of the same expectations that you would have for a AAA game released by Sony as a publisher, and people I think had overblown expectations for it. So part of my question is that at a microeconomic level or in little pockets around the gaming universe, do you guys feel that some of these market forces we're talking about, right, the mass proliferation of, quite frankly, a lot of crappy independently produced games with no quality control, saturating a rabid propagation of services and markets where you can buy those games, do you think any incremental extinction of parts of the gaming universe might occur?
think evolution is natural. So, yeah, I mean, change is going to happen. As you were talking, you were saying, well, what has happened, and the first thing that jumped in my mind was the Sega Dreamcast. So, and that was kind of a beloved console, and Sega had to pull out of the hardware business. So, and then Microsoft entered the space, and so I'm not sitting here saying like they'll always, when I'm old and gray, I'll be playing, PlayStation 22 or whatever. Like I don't know what's going to happen. I remember when I was a kid, Blockbuster Video was the thing to do. And, we saw how quickly that changed. So I don't want to say never, but through all that evolution, we still have video games and we still have means by which we can access video content. It may have changed, but that's still there. So yeah, there's definitely going to be collapses, and some big players are going to crush the little guys, and then some little guy is going to pop up and slay some big player, and we're going to be like, wow, I can't believe Valve didn't see this coming, or I can't believe Sony didn't see this coming. It's hard for me to though predict how that's going to go down. We see a lot of torches and pitchforks now over things like these microtransactions and whatnot, and that could be like a catalyst as far as change driving the industry. So we know that games haven't increased in the base cost. Then they try to kind of get around it by, oh, well, we're not going to charge more than $59.99, but they try to get around it by having the DLC or microtransactions or what have you. And I think there's going to be some changes in how games, make revenue, and I think those will be the big earthquakes in the market, so to speak. Some point, some AAA publisher is going to say, hey, it costs money to make this thing. We're going to charge $69.99 or $74.99 for this game, and we'll see what happens. And if they start making money hand over fist and some other players jump in, it could catch some other guys flat-footed. So, but yeah, it's hard for me to say what the landscape will look like later. But I agree that it's going to change.
Prime, are you back on?
Yeah, yep. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I just I got bounced out all of a sudden. I was checking something on social media and I got bounced. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, because I got bounced and now I forgot.
So it was basically, we've seen, so we've lived through and we've seen instances where the whole market didn't go down, but a big chunk of the market did. I talked about the loss of the mid-range game in console generation 7, where for a period of time there was nothing but AAA games, and then there were indie games or Xbox Live Arcade kind of games. So the question is could we see that, where we see whole sectors or a whole strata of the market eradicated by some of these market forces? So that was the general question. I'm going to spin yours just a bit now that Swiss has had a chance to propose an initial answer. Just to further the investigation, what happens if Microsoft goes hard on games as a service and doesn't do a next console? Okay. You have NVIDIA kind of pushing the same agenda, games as a service, leaving Sony and Nintendo in the hardware market. But because they're not doing subscription, they've got to contend with these ballooning costs and these constantly tightening up profit margins. Sony in console generation 7 eviscerated its first-party development camp and is just getting back to learning how to be more lenient or changing the financial goals for those studios. But my question is what happens if Xbox, Nvidia go hard into games as a service, step away from hardware, and not Nvidia wouldn't change; they just do cards, right? So, but Microsoft steps away from hardware, leaving Sony and Nintendo, who get forced to raise prices for games, knocking out a big demographic, right? Let's say it knocks out your young adult, teenage, high school kid, college kid market, knocks out a huge chunk of it. So now the market is predominantly supported by, mostly, I mean, it already is today, but let's say more so supported by young adults who are hitting that tip over point of getting away from college and actually starting to earn money because the price hike goes up so much. Do you think we also talk a lot here about the nerd's dilemma, right? The geek's dilemma of this assault of nerd content that forces you to make choices, right? Like there's just too many games, comic books, science fiction books, television. I mean, great Scott, there are entire comic book universes on television today. Like you could subsist on the Arrowverse solely. And already, if you only watch the Arrowverse, you would have 5 shows to keep up with, right, for an entire year of programming. So my question for you is, but is it feasible that the market could be so reduced that you see companies starting to leave the hardware part of the business and a rapid shift to games as a service?
I can see it because I mean you can kind of see Microsoft doing that with their Game Pass service they have got going now, and the recent announcement, or I shouldn't say recent, but it's been a few weeks, that they were all the first party stuff is going to be day and date on that service. When it's released out into the wild on digital and out into the stores and all that. So you can kind of see them going that way. Interesting thing though you brought up, because you said now it's if that happens, if Microsoft goes the way of the game service and it's just Sony and Nintendo, they got to raise prices, and it's the young adult, I shouldn't say young adults, but kind of the 30-year-olds and late 20s and trying to keep up with the industry now. But it's an interesting time now because I'm in my 40s, and I know gamers who are even older than me, like in their late 40s and 50s, that are actually still gaming. And there hasn't been a time like that where there was that older demographic that was still playing games at this time, at this generation. So there is that, those generation of people that are still out there and still playing games, and that could potentially, keep, that, Sony and Nintendo, going. I mean, obviously, yeah, they probably would have to eventually raise the prices, but you can kind of think of it that way too. It's a weird time now in games because, like, when I was growing up, my parents didn't play games like at all, really. I mean, my mom plays games kind of now just because on her phone and stuff, but they weren't playing Nintendo with me or Genesis, stuff like that. But I play all kinds of games with my son and with my nephews and my nieces and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think you got to kind of think of it that way too. So, but I don't know if they do have to raise the prices. I mean, do you see it just being like a $10 increment, or do you see it going even further than that? Because I know Nintendo, even back in the day, they were pretty pricey with their cartridges, and that was 20 years ago or so, 30 years ago, and now obviously stuff is starting to get so expensive to make. I mean, I don't know what that price jump would be, and if it's big enough, obviously, yeah, that could just cripple the whole industry, and maybe everything just collapses into mobile. And it's all like phone stuff. I mean, and then that poses whole different problems with Apple and Google, because they throw even more, I don't want to say crap, but more stuff out there than even both of these systems and stuff.
Well, that's an interesting angle and a good question, right? Because that's exactly what happened to the Vita, right? And now we have a market that is entirely dominated by one corporation, the only one left standing that has a mobile console. Vita came out at a time where I look. And I was a huge PlayStation Portable fan. I bought the thing twice. But Vita came out, and I'm like, I have smartphones and tablets that can play great games. Why would I? And I have to have a phone, right? I'm like, why would I spend the money on a Vita? And again, and again, I was a professionally employed adult, past that initial like get out of debt after college point, making money, and I didn't see any point in buying a Vita. That argument doubles when it's parents buying for their kids. Like, why would I buy my kid a Vita when I've made the decision? Again, it's up to families to make this. I've made the decision that they're going to be allowed to have a phone. One of the other questions that I pose as well is so back to the crash of 1984. That's a big part of what was going on. You had personal computers on the rise, and that started to eat into the console gaming market because people were being driven to feel like they had to have a computer. Again, it took a long time for that evolution to get to the point where kind of everybody has a computer, right? And I say that while I fully acknowledge the demographics of the United States and the fact that there's a large swath of the population that is below the poverty line and can't afford a computer, and doesn't have internet access in the urban areas where they live, which I think is pathetic, as far as our country's ability to solve that problem. But from a market perspective, from a corporate perspective, it raises questions of whether or not you put competing products out while those products are on the rise. But I'll throw into the mix for you, Swiss. Again, when we pan around and we look at other geek purveyors of geek content, the comic book industry was almost on its deathbed, right? Independent and third tier and even second tier publishers went away for a very long time. Or were bought and consolidated. It eventually got to the point where essentially Marvel and DC were the only ones left standing, and they were struggling, right? So it almost happened to the comic book industry. Oh, I'd say it did happen to the comic book industry, right? They collapsed for a period of time and then found a way back. Jodie Foster was just recently ranting about how basically everybody is doing nothing but going to see comic book superhero movies. I personally don't have a problem with that. I didn't agree with her rant. However, I will say I'm hard pressed if I sit down and take 3 minutes to put brain power on analyzing it. I'm hard pressed to know or think about where is the money in Hollywood if it's not in a Marvel movie or a DC movie. So they could be headed towards an extremely constrained market. And the in the desktop computer industry is kind of struggling now in a contractionary time frame. So I guess my point is I would almost say almost every other purveyor of core geek content has experienced a significant recession within the last decade that they've had to struggle to come out of as their own personal bathtub. So is that a potential indicator of a thing that could happen to the gaming industry?
You can throw TV into that mix too with all the streaming services nowadays.
Yeah,
they're popping up left and right. I mean,
well, not even just the streaming services. Just real quick, Swiss, before you jump in, but the hardware, right? Those guys and the media tried to make 3D happen, and as a result, lots of television manufacturers went under. Sharp is being sold, right? And Sony got hurt so badly by their effort to push 3D that they made a CEO change, right? I mean, they performed so badly financially, and the PlayStation division was the only ones that were successful that year. That they made the swap, right? They put the guy who was in charge of the PlayStation division in charge of the entire corporation, right? And his job was to turn around the fact that one of their core product divisions was failing and almost took the whole company under. So yeah, I mean, to me, just other examples of things that I question whether or not the video game industry is resilient, that it couldn't experience an extinction level event. But with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Swiss, for your opinion.
I was thinking as you were listing examples, I was trying to see what the common thread amongst them all would be. And it feels like the common thread is, I guess, democratization in a way. Maybe that's the wrong word, but you talk about Hollywood and, well, it's a shame that only the superhero big budget movies are the ones that are actually making money. And it's like, well, you know what? Hollywood movies are expensive, and I could pay $50 for me, my wife, and my 2 oldest children to go to the movie theater. And that's if I get, my in-laws or my parents to babysit for free. So, that's, and, or I can watch my parents' Netflix account and not have to pay a cent and get a lot of quality content. So it's, um, you know, the cable and everything took down, there was a big thing. Uh, you have DirecTV and whatnot. And now we have Netflix encroaching and all that. You talk about the generational thing. I'm a cord cutter. I don't consume media the same way my parents do. So yeah, I want to say there's going to be change. You talk about, uh, to kind of bring it back to more uh, tangible levels, though, with regards to, um, like your example of Microsoft doing streaming services or whatnot, and why wouldn't it be different? Why is today any different than it was in the past? And I think the situation in 82, 83, as you alluded to, with knockoff consoles and just confusion in the marketplace, is a significant factor. So you say, well, I didn't want the Vita, I already have my phone. Well, something like the Switch has a very different control scheme and a different feel. Like, you can't get those types of games on a phone. You can't get them on a tablet. So Microsoft going streaming makes sense to me because they already have basically a platform in Windows out there for that to be used. And I can see how that would be a viable strategy for them. I don't see how there's a strategy there for Nintendo to go streaming service. They need to have a hardware platform. I don't see a scenario where Sony, well, actually I do. Sony can try to like integrate their TV division or something, and their PlayStation division or something like that. But we can't forget about gameplay experience, and using the controller, and that's all, I think, a pretty major driver for games. It's not a passive medium, and I would just be hesitant to say, oh well, if somebody comes up with a way to ship games without having to eat hardware costs, that's going to be a game changer. Physical media is going to go away. We pretty much know that that's going to happen. But I still feel like the console itself, the controller itself, is important enough where there will be, hardware in the future. I don't see that. But as Prime was mentioning about, gamers in their 40s and 50s, and I just think we've already seen things evolve quickly with regards to how people consume information and entertainment. So I mentioned my parents, they're still using DirecTV, and there's a lot of people out there that still watch the 6 p.m. evening news, and I can't understand that mentality. There's people like, why didn't you read the newsletter? And it's like, man, why are you sending a paper newsletter? So it's like, I want my information. I want to subscribe to my information. So it's weird to think about video games becoming that, but I can definitely see that. So, like Prime said, I thought that was a really cool point. Games are going to kind of they're going to have to stay familiar because of all of us that are growing up with them. And we're not going to want to change. But, Facebook, remember how that was cutting edge back in the day? Oh, only college kids can do it. And then they opened it up and it got all like lame because everybody could be in it. And now it's like all middle-aged women, right? So they're sharing pictures of their kids and their grandkids. Like, what's the cool thing? Instagram's the cool thing. Snapchat's the cool thing now. What's the next thing the kids? So we see this churn, but I don't know. I don't feel like Facebook's about to faceplant either. I was kind of rambling about all those points, so I don't know
No,
if I really answered your question.
no, but you brought up good points, right? Because at the end of the day, this is all about the temporalness of technology, right? Prime, you bring up a good point of yeah, but now people who make large amounts of money, right, are part of this aging generation that still continues to game, and therefore there's still money coming into the gaming stream. There's a flip side to that coin too of do does that older generation I to kind of connect it to Swiss's point, I think a large part of what's happened when I talk about all those geek different product sectors that have all experienced major recessions, it's people found other things to do. And that to me is the question, right? When I talk about that cornucopia of content that's available, part of the question is do any of those things become reasonable substitutes for gaming? I will say right now, I'm embarrassed to say it, all of those things pushed the notion of reading novels out of the cradle for me, right? Like I don't have the time and the space and the ability to focus on reading a 300 to 500 page novel while I'm also contending with keeping up with different television shows, movie continuity universes. I mean, comic books have gotten pushed to the side for me. I'm only able to read trades now, and I barely claw at that periodically. I will. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think you just probably got to the crux of the matter, which is, will games become so annoying, or like, will the experience become too problematic for people to just choose another form of entertainment? And I guess when you put it like that, yeah, that's viable. I I just like games so much; it's hard for me to see that happening. I mean, but you know, people have each generation will have different taste. When you mention the example of novels, you know, I'm trying to read more. I did in the past a lot, and that's gone away, but that's just life, I think. Like right now, I'm kind of forcing myself. I'm reading The Hobbit to some of my kids for 20 minutes, you know, before bedtime every night, and that's getting a little bit of a fix in, and some family time too. But yeah, I can. For me personally, the entertainment that has been pushed to the wayside is television. I mean, I don't watch anything anymore. During the NFL season, I'm pretty glued because I have some, you know, other like game related habits that go along with it. but but so that's when I'm plugged into television, but I couldn't care less, you know, what next new show is coming out. Every now and then, you know, we'll get hooked on something on Netflix. You know, I watch Stranger Things and Stranger Things 2. Right now, basically, we're going through reruns of Seinfeld on Hulu, to be honest with you. So it's
Hey, me too.
Prime and I are like in sync tonight because we're like actually literally we just simultaneously put the same note in our chat client about our time. So it's kind of creepy, but yeah, but yeah, it's you. I don't even know what I was saying now.
Sorry.
But is gaming unique enough? Like the fact that it's an interactive method of entertainment that you can jump in for 30 minutes rather than having to invest like in a novel hour. I mean, I guess you can jump into a novel for short bursts as well, but is it unique enough to withstand the test of time would be my counter.
I think, like you said before, though, it's going to evolve like anything you know, like you said, there's going to be something with this next generation that's going to, you know, pop out. Maybe it's virtual reality, maybe it's, you know, something else, you know, just AR, augmented reality games. Those kind of pop up every once in a while, but they haven't really hit it big as far as AR games. But and then to bring up another point is I think stuff kind of happens in cycles too. Like you mentioned, the mid tier games kind of went away for a while. Now there's kind of coming back a little bit here and there, and just kind of game genres. Even you know, adventure games were the big thing back in the, you know, the early days, and then they kind of went away, and now they came back with Telltale's series of games, The Walking Dead, and whatever else they put out every few months or so. So I think that's another part of it too. Stuff I don't think ever really goes away. It just kind of hibernates, for a lack of a better word, and then it'll wake up again at some point in the future. So we just have to wait, I guess. If certain genres have gone, so they'll probably come back eventually.
Yeah, I guess as we head towards summing it up, I guess my feeling is I feel like we have experienced tremors. You might argue that those are minor tremors, of different fields and pockets of this thing that we do being on the tipping point of going away. And maybe for me, it's not even a matter of like the whole industry going away. It's just whether or not I stay in it. I know somewhere in a Microsoft OneNote notebook around here or on some tablet written in ink is me ruminating on what does the world look like if I get out of PC gaming, right? Because that whole that NBA 2K thing with Steam, but then some other events of like just not being able to find, and then reinforced by a couple months ago, the beginning of the year, really, it just being in my rotation that my new game purchase was going to be on PC, and opening up Steam and going, this is useless. And I don't have time for it, right? That was the other big thing when we talk about what's accessible, what gets the job done, and what's painful. And I'm like, I'm not going to pay money to be, subjected to pain, right? So in a couple iterations in the last year, I've said, there's tons of hardware in this place, and I'm like, and a lot of that's centered around PC gaming, and I'm like, what is my life? What does the world look like if that's not a part of it, right? Do I just live on Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox? Then you couple to that, what if Xbox goes away? So, mid-range games going away, flight sims going away. Over the last few upgrade cycles, I've said, what happens if you just get rid of all your flight control systems, right? Does that really have any impact? So I feel like there are these bits and pieces and nibbles that happen. Prime, as you talk about getting older, the kids, the age my kids are at, all of these things wind up with me periodically going, what happens if I give that thing up? And in some cases, I have given those things up. And the question is, does it ever reach, enough momentum in that snowball to just cause me to step aside? Now, again, that's not an industry-wide thing, but, from my perspective for the industry, just like you said, Prime, if they make gaming or a type of gaming or gaming on a platform, painful, right, and more of an inconvenience, then there's the potential that people are going to lose interest. If a big part of the gaming industry becomes hero style games, first person shooters wrapped around loot crates, right, that's a problem, right? And in my opinion, quite frankly, even though I don't regale the whole Star Wars Battlefront 2 Mafia with praise because of the way they behaved, but I feel if that game had gotten out of the chute without the mass protest, quite honestly, I don't know what this year, what the gaming world would look like, right? Because if there hadn't been a protest, then the assumption would have been that gamers were okay with it, and with the momentum that Destiny has had of we want persistent games coupled with loot crates, like I think that's what we would have been talking about for the last 2 months, right? Is like every other week the next near open world loot crate bound first person shootery hero based type game, community game that was coming out, right? And we would not be talking about things like Age of Empires remaster, right? So it's going to be interesting. It's definitely a changed time, and I think there's a lot of discussion around console generation 8 is very similar to console generation 7. I've heard the arguments that it's just a continuation of console generation 7, and we shouldn't even regard it as distinctive console generations. But I think there's a lot of movement and a lot of things changing, and a lot of things that left unchecked can potentially go in very bad directions. So,
I guess to try to put a little bow on this, but yeah, I see the dystopian scenario. I can see how it could play out. You've succeeded in showing me that. I just am not convinced that we're fated to experience this apocalypse of gaming. So this hellscape of loot crates and malice from corporate greed factories. But I just see Nintendo's blue ocean strategy. There's a marketplace, and eventually if they start hemorrhaging gamers, somebody's going to try to do something different to reclaim that. So, it's not dystopian, but, I just hope that we can continue enjoying our hobby and not viewing it like work. And when you mention what is a world like when I'm not PC gaming, and, I'm not a huge PC gamer, mostly because my computers are they're never top of the line. But I can see that. I get by. I don't have an Xbox. Prime doesn't have a Sony PlayStation. He seems happy enough, I think. But all I can say is we can survive without video games. When you're saying that, I just got a picture of like all the Who's down in Whoville singing on Christmas morning after the Grinch stole all their crap. And, they were cool with it. Ultimately, this is just entertainment, and it's a side thing. And even if it comes down, we'll have our families, we'll have our friends, and we'll be able to survive. So, there'll be a silver lining.
Yeah, I want to skew it a little bit different from that perspective. So I think the way I put it that way is because, unlike a casual thing for me, being a gamer is part of a major thing that I identify with. Right? It is a core hobby. Quite frankly, it drives a lot of the other things that I do. Right? My pursuit of investigating technology and projects and learning and propagating that learning through social media and creative content is largely driven from a gaming core. In similar fashion to where in a previous life, my life used to revolve around working out, right? My whole daily schedule was arranged around workouts, meals, and sleep, right? So in this vein, that's kind of what it is. And yeah, there'll be other forms of entertainment, but I know, for instance, from a work performance perspective, I know that today I'm not the same type of employee when I don't work out regularly, right? Because it kind of fashions the way my mind works and the intensity with which I approach things. Getting out of technology from an investigative perspective in terms of what that does for me, in terms of constantly learning, keeping up with technology, having to keep my mind sharp to adapt to constantly emerging technologies, new skill set, like just creating video content and constantly wrestling with the troubleshooting because I force myself to use different setups every time, is kind of the equivalent of other people playing brain teasers on their mobile phones, right? So yeah, yes, I get you, right. The loss of one platform in a hobby doesn't necessarily tank the whole thing. I think for me, PC gaming is something different because it's that investigative technology piece, right? The consoles, I plug them into the TV, they work. Largely, I think that has changed also, but PC gaming is about tinkering, right? It's about pushing a button and not knowing that it's going to work, right. And then trying to work your way back to figure that out.
Seeing if you can overclock your rig, how much you can push it, and your upgrades and everything. I mean, yeah, I feel you. Yeah. I get it.
And my last thing is, yes, I agree with you. I don't think we're headed towards an extinction level event. My only thing I say is I think there's the potential there. Again, a large part of that I say is left unchecked. I think one of the most interesting things to watch as this unfolds is it was the games industry's immaturity that allowed it to tank in 1984 because they didn't know how to handle it. I wonder if this time around, the games industry's immaturity will be one of its strengths, right? The fact that it has to constantly adapt to ever-shifting forces amongst its consumer base. That demographic has moved all over the place in the last few years. And I will say that the games industry is very resilient about constantly trying something different and figuring out how to shift, right? Studios have gone out of business, publishers have gone out of business, but it is an industry that I think adapts a lot better and avoids things happening to it like Wang, right, or Xerox. So hopefully it won't. I guess what I'm trying to come around to too is to say hopefully it won't be like the record industry, right, where they thought they had the formula and everything was locked down, and then they were significantly disrupted and they just never figured it out, right? And that industry is radically different today than it used to be, and it's not the same industry. So I don't know. Prime, say something and help us get out of here.
I just like to play games. That's all. I just want to play games, have fun. No, seriously though. Yeah, personally, like you're saying, there's times where I just don't want to play a game anymore. I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm sick of it, but I'm just like, you know what? I just gotta stop and I need to do something else. And eventually, though, I'll come back to games. So I don't think well, the three of us, even four of us with DB, I don't think we'll ever get out of gaming ourselves. I think it'll keep going, and just the rest of the industry too. Like you said, it's going to evolve. It's going to, like I said even before, earlier, it's going to evolve into something else. Maybe it's VR, maybe it's something else. Who knows? But I think it'll always be there, even if the PC and consoles do collapse for some reason. Totally. Like I said, we still have mobile games. You can always do those. You can always play Candy Crush or something if you if you need that fix. But but I think it'll survive. I don't think it's gonna explode or implode or do whatever. So it'll keep going.
I think the spin-off topic to expand on this is, what we would really predict for the gaming industry 10, 15 years from now. That might be a good little thought process. I know we touched on a lot of those subjects today, but we didn't really push that as the core topic of discussion. But yeah, let's just hope that when change happens, that the gamers pretty much the marketplace can make sure that it evolves in a positive way. So I think everyone would agree that Netflix surpasses Blockbuster in a lot of ways. Some ways, well, that's even a debate. So, but all right, I guess we're coming up on our 60 minutes. So anybody have any plugs?
I'm going to skip my plug. I do want to give one more cautionary note.
Okay.
Last one. Again, just so we don't think that something like this couldn't happen, another thing that I lived through, Prime, you may have lived through this as well. 1985, 1986, you woke up Saturday morning cartoons. There were all types of crazy action cartoons on. Mighty Orbots, the Galactic 7, Pole Position, Dragon's Lair, Dungeons and Dragons, right? 1986, 1987, the closest thing to an action cartoon on Saturday mornings was the real Ghostbusters. Action cartoons as a genre suddenly went away with zero warning. The premiere morning Saturday of the 1986-1987 cartoon season. My brother and I still talk about this because we were psychologically traumatized, right? We just woke up and we were like, dude, where's all the action cartoons? They were literally gone. And shortly thereafter is when you got like the Fox afternoon action cartoons of like Thunderbird, Thundercats, Silverhawks. That all happened because the Saturday morning action cartoon genre as a product market suddenly was wiped out and went away with zero warning.
I'll take it a step further. Saturday morning cartoons are just boom, they're gone too. They just left all of a sudden. Because now you got cartoons, you can just, flip on Netflix or whatever, and they're just there all of a sudden. So they just disappeared themselves.
Right. So that's it for me, Swiss. Go ahead and wrap us up.
They evolved.
They evolved to watch your cartoons anytime you want.
Yeah.
I can watch a G.I. Joe or Transformers anytime I want now.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s, there was significant hurdles to the democratization of cartoons, and you were beholden to the gatekeepers of the cartoon approval process. Nowadays, thanks to technology, we don't have to worry about that. So things have gotten better. maybe.
Swiss insists on being confident, denying the possibility of extinction.
It can't happen. I just, life finds a way.
That's right.
To quote
Mr. Goldblum,
Dr. Malcolm.
Yeah,
and also, we thought dinosaurs were extinct, but they weren't. Okay. On that note, I think we should stop because we're going in circles and spiraling out of control here. So, I'm Swiss Guard. For my friends Prime and Agasicles, we will be back on Thursday night. I think it's me and Prime. I think for the news show. No, it's not Prime. I don't know who it is.
I think it's Prime and I.
All right, two of us. Some subset of us will be on Thursday for the our most favorite news show items of the last week.
That's all right. I guess Cleveland DB.
Oh wow, I was really off.
Not even close. Everybody was wrong.
None of us were.
All right. Well, everyone, I hope you found this topic interesting. And as always, when they're pitched, we always kind of think, man, I wonder if we're going to be able to mine enough content out of that. And then now we can't shut up. So I'm sure we'll be revisiting aspects of this topic in the future. But thank you for listening, and thank you for joining us, and have a good night. Bye.